Said a storm would take me down. Said the noise would drown my sound. Said the road was way too long and I wouldn't last this long. But every night the screen lights up, things I know and hearts I trust. Through the chaos and the flame, you remind me why I came. When the sky was falling down, you were lifting me above. We're still standing strong tonight. Through the dark we found the light. When the wall said walk away, the rambler said we stayed. Voices rising in the chat. Hey, hearts that always have my back. Through the fire we belong. And we're still standing strong. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Some will try to break your spirit, some will try to dim your flame, but 1,000 voices cheering can outshine a little shame. Every laugh and every story, every friend along the way builds a place that keeps on shining brighter every single day. When the road fell hard to see, you believed in me. We're still standing strong tonight. Through the dark we found the light. When the world said walk away, the rambler said we stayed. Voices rising in the chat. Hearts that always have my back. Through the fire we belong. And we're still standing strong. This is more than just a channel, more than words up on a screen. It's a family that keeps shining through the toughest storms we've seen. When the nights felt long and endless, and the road seemed far too long, you were there beside me saying, Carolyn, keep moving on. We're still standing strong tonight. Embers shining in the light. Every voice and every name burning brighter than the flame. In the words that walk away, the ramblers chose to stand. And together we belong. Yeah, we're still standing strong. Ramblers rise, ramblers stand. Hearts together, hand in hand. Mommy rambling, shining bright. We're still standing strong.
Hello. Hello, hello, hello. Is Mr. Wu here? Mr. Wu, are you here? Are you here, Mr. Wu? Okay, hold on a minute. Margaret, good to have you back. What is with my hair today? I is a lunatic today, huh? I don't know what's going on. I got to do something with this hair. I got to color my hair for sure. Okay. Where the heck is the live chat? So we have a double header tonight, but I wanted to keep this in its own video because who is watching this trial? I have to know who's watching the trial. Are you watching the trial? Can you hear me, Margaret? Let me see. Lunatic. Oh, yes, yes, okay. Hi, Sandra. How are you? Are you watching the trial, Sandra? Tree Dog, are you watching? Dookie, are you watching the trial? I really would love to be live streaming the trial, but when they don't have their links, and I mean, I had someone from Law and Crime tell me, go ahead, you can take our, but I get scared because I want my own link. I don't want, how do I know that, I just get paranoid. Anyway, but this is something. I am sitting here transcribing this trial. Oh, thanks, Margaret. Margaret, you're going to go with me? You're going to go on vacation with me? Are you going to come down and see me in South Carolina? Okay, so let me see what I was going to do. So I've been transcribing this, and that's how I started doing trials. I kept them in notebooks back in 2019 and 2018. I kept at 2019 mostly. I had notebooks and notebooks full of the trial. And then I started to type it into, on one screen I was watching the trial, and the other one I was typing the transcript in, so I have it. So, okay. Let's, today was crazy, and I put my thoughts into it and everything. So today, we again had Job Esperanza, Espinoza on the stand, and he's going over the different videos. The DA is going over the different videos, right? Because we're seeing a lot of different videos, and remember, they had videos of him taking Tanner Horner like to the bamboo forest, and then to the Trinity River, then back to the sheriff's office. So that's what they're saying. So they're like, okay, we left you and you were taking him back to the sheriff's office. What happened after that, right? There's another video. He said it's in the interview room, and that's what they're going to play next, that I'm going to tell you all about that. So at this point, they're asking him about this guy Zero. Now, this guy Zero is an alter ego that we're going to learn more about him, but Tanner, it's his bad side, right? It's, they'll go, I want to talk to Tanner about that. Oh, yeah, okay. And his eyes get all crazy. Anyway, so they said the second time that you went to the bamboo forest, and every time I hear them say bamboo forest, all I think of is the movie Elf. It just drives me crazy. You went to the bamboo forest. What did we hear above you guys? And so Job says, you're hearing the helicopters. They were continuously flying until Athena was found. At that point, how long had you been going along with this story about Zero? And he said about 6 hours. And then he said, he asked Job, why after they found Athena, did he just keep playing along with this game about Zero? And he said, well, it's common practice when you're conducting an interview to keep playing this up because it has more to do with rapport, and you keep them from shutting down if you want to learn information. And he said, at the end of the day, it's about finding Athena. Okay, and then the DA asked the same question over and over so many times. But then when you find Athena and you go to the jail, and then before you have another conversation. And he's like, after the second? And he's like, yes, there was another interview. And he asked to speak with you on December 7th. And then he's like, oh, yes. And he goes, who requested that interview? And he said, Tanner Horner requested it. So after Tanner Horner was in jail about a week, he requested another interview with Job. Is there anything besides the location of where Athena was? Is there anything truthful that he told you? And Job says no. But see, I agree later on. That is not a true statement. How many versions did he give you about her clothes? And Job says many. How many of where her body was? 2. Now, setting up for the video of him talking to the alter ego. right? He said, you're talking to the alter ego. Yes. At one point, do we get Tanner back? Yes. How? And Job says he seems to come back out of it, out of the alter ego, and he comes out of it like it was a psychosis. So at some point, do you talk to Zero again? Job says yes, because that is when he tells the truth. So all you have to do is just ask for Zero? Yes. Who does he blame for all of this? And Job says, everyone but himself. And they said, does he consistently do that? Yes. When he wants a cigarette, or he talks about wanting to leave her at the scene, who is that? Tanner. Who's the one that's worried about his kid? Tanner. When you challenge him about his inconsistencies, who talks to you? Zero. When you're talking about what he did, who are you talking to? Zero. Is that a pattern? Yes. And he explains, he plays the game to get to the truth. This is Job talking. And now they're going to talk about the December 7th interview. Again, the DA says, Tanner asked you for that? Yes. The same interview room? Yes. What purpose did he say? And Job said he wanted to cut a deal. So, okay, they said, let's put the video back on. So they put the video back on, and we're back in the truck again, right after they found Athena's body, and they got back to the sheriff's office, okay? So Tanner's in the front passenger seat of Job's truck. Job's driving. They got two people in the back. And they arrive at the sheriff's office. And then they show you that Tanner is outside smoking a cigarette with them there. They help him, light it and stuff. And he's against a wall. And there's a light on outside. And so while he's smoking it, one of the other rangers says to him something about, asks him when he was trying to break her neck. Was that Tanner? And he says it was Zero. They said it was Zero, and he nods, right? And then he's like, yeah, okay. Let's see. Now, did she defecate on herself? They ask him. He says yes. Then he says it took about a minute, meaning to strangle her. And then they talk about the sock that they found. And was that Athena's sock? And he says, yes, it was. And they ask where he tossed it. But he's evasive about the clothes. And they ask if he took any of her clothes to Tanner's house. They ask if she was wearing the clothes. He says he dumped her clothes all over the highway. And it sounds like he said, is that wrong? He said he did it because he thought it was funny. They asked if Tanner took clothes home. And he said something like, he's not stupid. And then they said, I think Tanner does not shite where he eats, right? Yeah. He says, that was me, meaning Zero, okay? He says he left her panties on her. And they ask who was speaking inside. And he says, Tanner. So I addressed you as Zero, Job said, so you would talk to me. And then Tanner says, Ezra, it's only respectful. Job apologizes for not speaking to him as Zero and says he has one more question. Who decided to take Athena at her house, okay? And he is silent, and he says, to take her? And he's thinking, and then he says something about the trash at his house, but I'll clarify that in a little bit. And then he says, when you took her, what was she wearing a jacket? And he says, no. Shoes? No. So no jacket, no shoes? Did she tell you she didn't want to go with you? What did you tell her? And he says, yes. She didn't want to go. And then he says that, they said, then I just told her that you're going to go on a ride with me. And then he says, Tanner wants to die. They say, if he dies, you die. They go about, then he's talking about how he threw the clothes all over the highway. He tells them about a road and why did you throw out her clothes? And he said, well, she was going to tell. So you had to punish her? He says, she said she was going to tell when they were at the house. They ask about her clothes again. They ask where he threw the clothes, and he lies to them. Her clothes were taken off, and you were driving down the road, and she's not wearing clothing? Then what did you do? He said, I find a place to put her. Where? The creek. Then what? So, he said, I headed back to the FedEx station on the back road. Tanner doesn't know the time. Do you know the time, they ask him? Because they're talking to Zero now. About 8:30. Do you remember when you turned your phone on? He gives a time, and then they said, do you remember what time you left that FedEx package? And he says, no, he was asleep. Then he says something inaudible, and then they were in the interview room again, okay, in the sheriff's office, and they follow him in, and they walk him over, and they sit him down, and they get him some water, and the whole time he's walking over there, first they're doing this long walk, you just hear the clink, 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 clink of the ankle chains. So they walk him over, and then they say, Tanner, why are the pants and Athena's sock out in the back behind the shed? And then did Tanner, he said he found them in a backpack. They said, did Tanner put them in the backpack? Did Zero put them in the backpack? And he says, yes, and something very sinister with a little laugh, but it's difficult to hear. And then, let's see. They go to, Job gets a key or something so he can loosen up a handcuff on him. And they give him this big, giant cigarette. It looks like, I didn't know what the heck it was. It was the fattest cigarette you've seen. Like they just rolled something together for him. It was just crazy. They go back to talking. They stopped it right there in the courtroom, and they talked to Job on the stand, and they said, okay, now this video, okay, that we're going to see in the interview room. Does this one begin where that other one stops? Yes. So now they play the video. So they lead him into the interview room. They sit him down. They get him some water. And another Texas Ranger was there with him at first. And then Job is not there at first. So you have Tanner's trying to struggle to open this water bottle to get a drink of water. And the other Texas Ranger says, "Where do you shower and go to the bathroom at your house?" And he says it's his grandmother's. And he said something, and they said, "At the same property?" And they said, "What about go to the bathroom?" And they said, "Where do you go?" And he said, "At his grandmother's," because it's grandmother's house on the property, but they live in a shed. And the ranger is looking at his phone, and they're just the two of them there. And the ranger asks if he told them everything. And he said, "Who? What, me?" And they said, "0." And he said, "It's me. Just me." Okay. Then Job comes in. He says, "It is not 0, it's Tanner." And he asks if it's okay. They ask him if he's okay, and he says, "Wow, he's just a little flabbergasted." And he said it's like he has been in the back seat watching, and he's been in and out of it, and he has not... they said, okay, they start saying it's a weird time of respect because you're addressing him. So now, oh my gosh, Job's going to go into this big thing about how he's so respectful and everything, and he's talking to 0, and then Tanner's like, "Oh, okay," they tell Tanner that it's a lot to process, and because Tanner's like, "Oh, I don't know what happened, I'm in and out of it," and but they're going to step out, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to step out of here now. I know it's a lot to process here. You're just coming out of your psychosis, right? We're going to leave you here for a minute." And right away, he puts his head right down on the table. He's got the other hand, like, still holding the water bottle that's on the table. His hat is off in front of him. He is quiet. He's not saying or doing anything. He's just laying there. And he's still, like he is sleeping. No twitching, no movement. And a side note, I said, the gauges, in court, he's got the gauges, these huge gauges that he had in his ear, they're removed. He still has, like, holes in his ear, okay? What else did I say? That was a side note. The holes in his ear are considerable size holes in his ear, I said. He just keeps staying there. The other ranger left his hat on the other end of the table. He doesn't touch it. There's a box of tissues and a box of pump hand sanitizer on the table. He continues like this for many minutes. My impression, he is much more crafty and cunning than the defense wants us to believe, and while this behavior may have developed from things that happened to him in his life, it is how he is functioning, and it's like he acts like he just, and it's hard to believe something so heinous as the kidnapping and murder of a 7-year-old girl is the first crime that he's ever committed, So they come back and they ask him for the passcode on his phone. And he acts like he just woke up, okay? And he stumbles to get the code, stumbles on his words to get the code, and he asks why they are, what are they going to tell him? And they tell him that, hold on, what did I just do here? They tell him that, that he can call Cassie, but he wants to video chat with her, and they placate him, And then he tries to like flip up his hat, and he's like, oh, I used to be able to do that. And then that video ended, and they're back on the stand, and they asked Job, did he take any items from the house? What was his initial answer? No, Job said. And then you asked about the panties, and he said they were still on her. But what do you know? And Job said it was a lie. How? They asked him. He said, I could physically see her body. And let's see, as part of the interview, they mentioned that the pants were at his house. And Job says he stated that they were placed in the backpack. And then he says that they were thrown in the trash. When asked why he took the clothes off, he said because it was funny. And he says he threw her clothes out the window. All of that info, is it true or not? And Job says, based on the course of this investigation, I believe it's all a lie. Did you find out things from a later time, if true or not, later in video evidence? And he said, yes, he found out later with video evidence things that were not true that he said. The next interview is the interview from December 7th. And they asked him, how did you find out he wanted to have an interview with you? And he said, well, the Wise County Sheriff's Office said that Tanner sent a kite. Remember the kite from Simondelli, the kites? A note to request the interview. And this would be a week after he kidnapped and murdered Athena. He wanted to speak to you? Yes, says Job. You said earlier he wanted to cut a deal? Yes, says Job. When people say they want to cut a deal, what does it mean, they ask him. He says, basically, in my time in law enforcement, in my experience, they want us to be a conduit with the DA's office. If I'm truthful, to reduce their time, that's what they're saying, is what they desire. Who went to this interview? He said, myself and investigator Oliver. On the first part of this, do you discuss his proposed deal? Yes. Later, does Tanner talk about his work history? Yes, and that is normal. Historical questions to learn more about his work history, his family history, his dating history, having a baby with Cassie. And they're like, okay, you learned all about yes. You discuss his work, where he worked? Yes, says Job. And then, is there also reference to the whole zero thing? Yes. Now let's talk about the deal he wanted to cut. Prior, did you advise him of his rights? Yes. He asked for this interview? Correct. Initially, what is the basic proposal about the deal he wants? And Job says he wanted to be free. He wanted to be free with an ankle monitor and GPS monitoring, his ankle monitor, and spend Christmas with his son, and that we could monitor him, and he will fully cooperate during this time. Did you agree? He says, no, we can't make that kind of promise. He said, I was 100% forthcoming, and I told him that's not going to happen. And he said he wants to have Christmas with his son, and if you let him do that, he will tell you everything. Yes. Did you ask him some questions about why and what happened to Athena? Yes. Did he tell you? No. He just keeps diverting back to the deal. He has to keep prying for information, Job said. He just keeps talking about something to get him to talk and tell him the truth. This is the first part, yes. In the middle is where you get his history. And at the end, you have a detailed discussion about the zero thing, yes. At any point, did Tanner take responsibility for what he did? No, sir, says Job. Did you ask him if he feels remorseful? Yes. Does he ever say he's sorry for what he did? Not that I can recall. He believes he asked if he had anything to say to Athena's family. And Job said he wanted to give them a hug, is what he said. They show him something about the video, so he's got to say, okay, I understand this is video, let's publish it. So they publish the video, okay? So this video begins. This is one on December 7th, okay? He's been in jail a week. He's let into the room. He's got the jumpsuit with the stripes on it, right? And they go over his rights for a while, and they tell him stuff. And then they ask about his attorney, and he says something about apologizing and something about female jailers, but it's not very clear. He starts laughing about something, like he's like, oh, okay, he's not like so stressed. And this is when they give him that really big cigarette thing, okay? And he says, listen, I just want a month. If you give me 1 month with my family so I can have Christmas with my son, I'll tell you everything you want to know. And Job says that's above his pay grade. And he says, you know what, Tanner? Give me some good faith. I think you trusted me to tell the truth, and I trusted you. And I listened to you. Tanner, tell me the truth, and we can corroborate you are telling the truth. So from the beginning, what path you took has been answered, and where you put her has been answered, and we got her home now. But the why has not been answered. But you have to give me some answers. There are, and he goes back to, but what about 1 month? Like, he just keeps going. And then Job says, I can't promise you or tell you that's even possible. And then he says, how many questions did you ask? How many questions did you do? Did I answer direct and truthful? Yes. Okay, that's what he asked him that. He says it's a two-way street. If there is and then he's like, if there's this is Tanner. There's just a little sliver of possibility that I could get this. And you have to answer the why to give us some good faith. That's a big question. Why did you do this? And he said it's a mini motivation for us talking. And he goes, I want to see my son. And he talks about Christmas. And Job asks for good faith. And do you know what you did was wrong? And he says, of course. Tanner says, of course. And then he says, after 5 days, he said something like not being able to cry. It was hard to hear that. And then he said, are you remorseful? And what he says is, I'm a father. I took away. And then he's like, I just asked for 1 Christmas with my son. And then he says again, are you remorseful? And he says, I'm a father. And then Job says, tell me about that. And he says, I hurt her or her family. And then he says, what would you want to say to her mom and dad if they were here? And he just like ignores that, and he goes, is there even a sliver of a chance? A sliver of a chance? So he avoids the question. He's right back, sliver of a chance that he can spend Christmas with his family. like he's not going to give them anything unless it's a benefit to him, right? So then he says something about the place he lives and his grandmother and being back there and right those wrongs. He says something, and then he says something like God spoke to him, and that is what he should ask for. Again, Job explains it's over his head, it's above his pay grade. He does not want to give him false hope. And then he says, as a parent, if Athena's parents were here, what would you say? He says, I don't know what I would say. He says he would be speechless. And then Job says, what would you want someone to say to you? And he just sits there and says nothing, and then he goes right back to talking about the deal he wants. He's got like a one-track mind, right? Just keeps going right back to it. Okay, again, Job says, I'm not going to give you false hope. Oh, hold on a minute. Good night, Luke, I love you. Okay, sorry. Let me see here. This is above his pay grade, and he doesn't even think it's possible, Job says. And that's what he said. If I wanted to BS you, I could, but I'm not going to do that. And then Job says, hang on, I want to tell you something from the bottom of my heart. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for letting me bring Athena home to her parents, to her family, so they could have closure. And I really want to tell you that, and I didn't get to tell you that. From the bottom of my heart, I genuinely appreciate that, and I wasn't able to express that. And then he said, I do see a little remorse in you. And I feel you as a parent, as a person. And then he says something like, Job says, I'm a person like you. I have emotions. And, think of me as a person, not a police officer, as a person. The family needs to understand the why. Now we need to explain to the community the why, to the people, all the affected people. This is Job saying this. So Job says he didn't sleep for days looking for this little girl. And they tell him her parents' names, and they say, how can, he can't tell them the answers to their questions that they want. They want to understand why. Last night he says that her father asked why. He wants to know why. He has 2 other daughters, and they said, I could not tell him. I know what you want, and I will listen to that, but if this is something you can do to help us, but then Tanner just goes, would you be able to talk to the judge about this? He's not even like listening or comprehending what they're telling him. And he says, Job says, I will convey what you tell me to the judge and the prosecutors, and I will also convey that I am not able to give you false hope, but if you want me to relay something, I will. We need to know what happened. You walked us step by step, how you took her, where you put her, that you killed her. We know what happened. These answers we have. But they want the why. And then let's see. He says, and I can't tell them. I can't tell them the reasons. And then right away Tanner goes back. I just want one last Christmas of videos. And then this is so weird because if you see where he lives, he goes, the train and his presence and to tape the entire thing and look back on that. I want him to have something to look back on, look back on them. That's the reason I want to trade something. So my son, can put me on, he said, you can put me on a monitor. You can have all the things you want. And I just want one more time, one last critical time for his son. He will give up everything, he says. Just throw him in somewhere forever. He does not care. He will give all his offenses. He will plead no contest. He said, just for the last Christmas. And then Job says he said he will convey that, but it's probably not possible. We can't give you any false hope, Job says. We will convey it, but what I can tell you is the answer will be no. What do you want to say to the family? Job asked him again. And he says no one deserved any of this. He talks about giving away his rights. He's got a one-track mind, going over and over the same thing, keeps leading it back to the Christmas. And then Job says they are taught from a young age right from wrong. And then you come up and, he asks him if anything like this ever happened, like what happened with Athena. Is this the first person you killed? And he says nothing like this has ever happened. And then he said something like he cries over a squirrel that he hits. And it sounded like he said he ran over a dog at work. And he said something about being on medication and something for 2 days. And that Job tells him, wait, you're being evasive and you wanted to speak to me. And I showed you I respect you. I'm showing you I respect you. If you had not reached out to me, we would not have spoken again for a long time. So what I'm trying to do here is fill those voices, and that the family first and foremost finds out why for them. It is not about you. It's about them. That closure that you would want as a parent. I told you why it happened in the first place. I knocked her down with the truck. Nothing would have happened if I didn't knock her down with the truck. I would be at work right now, he says. And I would be talking about getting an apartment. We finally got a car. I was driving a work truck home. He said he's not a bad person. Life was just getting bad. He said he has always done the right thing. The only bad thing I do is smoke marijuana. But slowly that's going to be legal. But that is literally the worst thing I've done in my life. Let's see. He said, look at his history. He is not a deranged psychopath. He's not a violent person. He's just an autistic guy who likes weird music. He was in a Christian punk band. He worked years to master his craft, he says. He writes his own music. He has his lyrics. He's smart and talented. Works for a living. So you are telling me, Job says, if you never hit her with that truck, this would not have happened? And that you just panicked and you took her in the truck? And then Job says, that's a lie. She died because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, essentially. And then he says, can I have another cigarette? And then Job says, let that settle for a while, because they were letting him smoke in the interview room. He said, this fire detector is going to go off. And then Tanner says, it breaks his effing heart that little girl is dead. And Job says, I'm glad to hear that, because if you do have some type of remorse, that goes a long way. And he says, well, I'm not a cold-blooded killer. If I was a cold-blooded killer, he says, I would be killing people for years. I am a person with feelings. I wanted to let her go. He didn't want to let her go. I mean, Zero. And I have not heard from him for 2 days, from Zero, since he got back on his medication or something, he says. So then he goes, and can I ask you guys a favor? Can you do research on something for me? And they're like, yeah, maybe. What is it? And then he said, well, he says, can you look up the potential psycho effects of Prozac? And how many, and they go, well, how many meds are you on? He's like, well, I take Prozac, Strattera, Remeron, and he also knows of something else there. He said, ask his doctor. Let me see here. He gives him the doctor's address. They talk about cracking their knuckles. He then asks about, he then shows him scars that he has on his knuckles, he says, from playing the drums, and then it goes back to doctors again. When did he stop taking his meds? He talked about suicidal thoughts. So that's when he went to this outpatient place called Millwood, and they set him up with this outpatient thing, Ad Care, and they helped him get back on his meds. And then Job says, do you care if I get to know you a little better? I just want to get to know you a little better. I'm not going to interrupt you. I just want to know things about your life. Where were you born? What did you do? So he goes, well, his dad is a crackhead. But if you type in Horner in Fort Worth County or something, he said his dad and his brother, they're both named Terry. He tried to disassociate with them multiple times. And then he said he went to multiple places for school, moved around a lot. The last elementary school was in Wise. His high school years, for them, he was moving around a lot. His mom was a heroin addict. He was raised by his grandmother and his step-grandpa. He said his step-grandpa, Bill, was the father to him. He was a good guy, and he passed away a few years ago. Then they said, what was your childhood like? He said, I didn't even realize I had a bad childhood. I didn't know, because I didn't know how bad it was. Because I didn't know why my mom was gone, why my dad was gone. My dad was in prison. And then he said now when he called his mom, she says, oh, how the tables have turned, because he used to see his mother in prison all the time. And he thanks God for his grandparents. Let's see. And they said, well, you have a good work ethic? He said, oh, that work ethic came later when he became a father. He didn't have it in his 20s. His 20s were interesting. He said he played in a band, and then he just goes on this tangent. He says it was a Christian punk band, and he met a girl there named Nicole, and she was crazy, but it's a funny story. And so he goes on, and he's talking about a Japanese word that means stupid, and he chose her, and she cheated on him, and then he says he drove Uber, and he found the guy that she cheated on him with, and he was showing her the text messages, and this girl, Nicole, had been cheating on him for years, and then he went through this made him go through a suicidal depression, And he says that he was just thinking 3 to 5 years down the drain like that. And then she like locked him out of wherever they were, and he was Uber driving, and he said that she told one of his jobs something, and he lost a job. And then he was about 300 pounds when he was with Nicole. When he broke up, he got up to like 350 pounds, and then he got put on meds. And once he got put on the meds, he says, you know what, I'm going to do something about this. So he went on a keto diet, and he said, oh my gosh, that diet, he would have 4 sausage and 4 eggs for breakfast. He'd drive his Uber until about 5 to 6, and then he'd go to the gym, and he'd run for an entire album, he said. And he got down to 215 pounds in just a few months, and he started to socialize more. And he said he didn't really usually want to go out, but something told him to go out on Friday and Saturday nights. And let me see here. And then he said he went to a bar, and then he met someone named Karen and Stacy. And Stacy's a dude, and something about, he says something like about that's what he says. And it's one of his best friends, but they would hang out, they'd do their thing. But that's when he lost his car. So he started working with his cousin Bert and his dad. Me and my dad worked for him, but it was hot work. It sounded like they were taking out air conditioners and things and stuff. He said one time a unit fell out and he caught it, and after that he started going to Guitars and Cadillacs because his cousin wanted to go there. He said his cousin was going through a midlife crisis because he broke up with his partner, and he's in his early 40s at that point. This is the cousin. And he is animatedly telling the story. He's laughing. Oh, you want to hear the funny part? He does not seem like a person with autism or Asperger's at all. Okay, he makes eye contact, everything. He's telling funny stories. He keeps saying, oh, wait, you want to hear this funny story? He talks about his cousin and his girl, and he explains this whole concept about how he screwed the girl that he was with, his cousin did, out of this money from this house, and his cousin got the upper hand. Like, he understands all of that, and he's laughing about it, and he's telling him this, and he says, I think my cousin's having a house built. I don't know where he is now. I think he might be in Jasper or something, or Joshua Tree. I don't know, something like that. And then he says, the last time he heard from Dad, he was homeless, and he wanted to live with them. He's like, how can he live with me? I live with my grandmother and my mother. So I just, said, I can't help you out. And then Cassie, he said he met her, and it just clicked with them. But then her mother was interested in him, and he's like, she was like 58. But he said he didn't talk to her for like 2 weeks later, and she thought he ghosted him. And he says, I used to have a bad problem like ghosting girls because he'd flirt with them or he'd sleep with them, and then where do you go from there? So he said that they started going out in October of 2019, but her mom's always been a bit abusive, and they have a friend, Jackie, who helped them, and she's an acquaintance. She's like, I hooked up one time with her, but before Cassie, it says, you seem like a player, and he's like, well, yeah. And they're like, how is your relationship with Cassie? He's like, he's great, it's great. And after a couple of months, they ended up moving in with, she ended up moving in with me, he said, because her mom was slightly abusive. And then Cassie lost her car, so they ended up getting one of those stimulus checks. And he said, let's get an apartment in Arlington, and we get a car from a friend named Chris, and then they were living there quite a bit, and he got a job at Papa John's, and he worked for them before. And let's see, and then he starts talking about, but he didn't want to deliver in this one area because there's a lot of people that don't tip in that area. And it was an ethnic comment. And then, let's see what he said. So he has said they ended up moving because those people didn't tip up there. And they moved... They moved into an apartment. Things were going typically well. And then a few months later, Cassie's cousin gets out of jail. And they ask him, what was he in jail for? And Tanner goes, well, he's a POS, right? Piece of shite. And I'm not anyone to call people a POS, but he was a drug addict, POS, and we lived close to his school, but he was not supposed to be there by the school. So while he was still around, and he's like saying that he's there, and then this was like so convoluted, and I guess people were coming there and damaging the apartment and damaging the cars, and the landlord got pissed. Someone broke the windshield. Someone did all this stuff. Okay, it was like none of their faults. He says nothing of it was their fault. It was all because of this cousin and all of that, and so there's a whole bunch of chaos going on, and then they get evicted from there or something, and let's see. Because the landlord threw them out, and then they find another apartment, and it's by Sam's Club. He can't remember the name, and he says, but they get there, and he's saying like they're changing companies, and there's this big thing, and they both started working at Outback Steakhouse, he said, and he was a dishwasher, and Cassie was a waitress, and she was working double shifts until the week before she gave birth, and he was like proud of her and stuff, and then he knows like everything about his son being born. He goes like this, oh, my son was born at 6:14, and he was 6:14, and he has the big long name, Chester, and then they go, what hospital was he born at? He's like, I don't know. I can't remember the name. It's just crazy. So, but he said that after the son was born, Cassie got postpartum depression, and she was really depressed. At the time they were still in that apartment, a few months later, they went to his grandmother's house. Excuse me. No, he went to her grandparents' house, Lynn and Patsy. He can't remember their last name. And they wanted a good environment for Chester. He was working as an Amazon delivery person. It's kind of the same as FedEx. And he goes, you want to hear a fun fact? This is what I mean. That's how he's talking. That's the way he's talking. I said, he has a lot of emotion. He's not flat. He's very animated, tons of emotion. I said, making a lot of eye contact. He talks about how he is going to work, and it was not steady. So he was getting fed up when he was doing this Amazon stuff because he'd go there and then they wouldn't pick him for the day. So he had to do something else. Then he got back on the keto diet again. He said because he gained weight with the pandemic. He ended up losing so much weight, he said, and see, he always blames something. He goes, he lost 60 pounds in 3 months, and he got up one day after losing 60 pounds, and he says he lost consciousness. He hit the back of his head. He had a seizure or something, and he just called into work that one day. That's that one day, and they said, fine, you're on a 3-month leave now. So he said that that was BS, and then he went to FedEx from there. He's the third-party, contracted driver, and he started there in February of 2022, and then he went to Hazel High School, so his first roots were in Hazel, so he knows it like the back of his hand. But then they would mess him up, they'd change his route, they'd do this and that and the other thing. And he said then after a little bit, he had a mental breakdown and he kind of got put on meds again. But he couldn't get Cassie to do anything because of her depression. He said he was depressed, like he couldn't provide for his family. And it took him so much time, the state he was in, to do like 5 deliveries in 1 hour. And then he got suicidal. And from that point, he had to leave work early. And then he went to that outpatient thing. And that's when he started popping up. That means 0. And he looks up and he says it started out as like a devil on his shoulder. And he was switching back and forth, if that makes sense. And on a side note, I hate when people say, if that makes sense. I can't stand that. I hate that expression. Is that a coping mechanism? They asked him, and Job starts explaining this. He starts saying about how this might be a coping mechanism and goes into this big song and dance about this. And then Tanner is all over the place, okay? He's just telling one story after another. And he says, let's see. He keeps working around as a floater, and he hates that because he has Asperger's, he says, and he likes his routine. But they start putting him on different routes, and they put someone on his route, and he would only get that route once a day. He starts talking about this Polaris thing. He keeps going on, and talks about how he was chased by a peacock, and then he had to deliver to a nudist colony, and some 400-pound guy answered the door totally naked. And he says he didn't like that. And Job says, it took you away from your normal routine. And he says, yeah. So he was dealing with that. And he told him he never wants to go back to that nudist colony. Try to get on Hazel route because he knows that like the back of his hand. He said he was not getting paid by the hour. And so his goal was to just get it done. On FedEx, he gets paid by the hour. But then he said he was at his mother's for about a month, and it's not a good place. There's a bunch of dogs, and they moved in the shed, and he said he cleaned the crap out of it. Now, if you see this shed, that he says he cleaned the crap out of it. He said because there were 3 brown recluse spiders, and so it's a big no-no. So they just let Chester go live with her family. He goes, because wolf spiders aren't dangerous. They might be scary to some, but they're not dangerous. Like he goes, the brown recluse, they had to do it. So he's just trying to make an excuse for why he let the son go live with her parents. But when you see the condition of this shed, it's just unbelievable. And he says he cleaned this crap out of it. Okay. And he says that, so essentially this son that he wants to give up, everything to have a month, his son wasn't even living with them. Okay. And then he says Cassie's not doing anything, and they're both developing a relationship with 0. And they're like, what do you mean by that? He says that Cassie has 3 different personalities, no, Cassie has multiple personalities, and she says, I have 3, but I don't see that. She gets that from her grandmother, but at this point, it is bad. He missed his son. He didn't realize some people that he was dealing with were psychotic. And then he talks about an RV park. And someone had an extra RV they were going to get there. And they had a space AC. It wasn't working. And the car broke down. And they only have Cassie's car. And she can't do Grubhub anymore. and he's the only one working, and he starts talking about, oh, that's right, I got to tell her she's got to put in a 1099 that she needs to file. And then he said her car breaks down, and her family is blaming him, and for a month he was driving work trucks home, and after a while, he says, they start putting up a sign at FedEx, and they were for $18.50 an hour. They were hiring package handlers, and so he tells Cassie, and so for the last month she was working there, and after a few weeks we went to a car dealership, and he says that we were able to buy a car. We put just $1,000 down. It's a 2015 Chevy Sonic, and he couldn't remember the name of the car, but then Job was like putting that out there, and he said, but it's not bad. And then Job's like, yeah, just gotta get you to point A to point B. That's all it needs. Sounds like things were starting to get better. And he's like, yeah, they started getting better. And then the last 4 months, zero became more prominent, he says. And before we moved out of her grandmother's house, he became more prevalent. He's coming out more and more and taking over. And I don't mind it sometimes. Because he says it's tedious and long on some routes. I listen to a lot of metal music, he says. I do not know how to describe it. I am starting out to discover the other me. And Cassie wants to understand it. And there are different states. If I'm driving, it is normal. And then there are times when I'm in the back seat and zero is driving. And other times I'm in the trunk and I have no idea what's happening. And then he shows a scar on his leg, and he's like, I have no idea how this happened. He says, I could say I blacked out, but sometimes he can recall things. And then Job said, well, with Athena, what can you recall? And he's like, well, I thought it was a nightmare until I found the pants in my backpack. I thought it was a bad dream. All of a sudden, he grabs the sand. Like, this is so weird. Like suddenly he's thinking about that, and it's like, something Jimmy will always tell me, like, we watch something on TV, like hoarders or something gross, like what someone's getting bloody. He goes, you just feel like you need to take a shower just watching that. Well, that's what it was like. That's what it reminded me of. Like, he saw something, he thought about that, and it's maybe of all the stuff, and it just made him feel like dirty. And then he just started putting this hand sanitizer on. It was so weird. So weird. So anyway, he starts putting the hand sanitizer on, and then they said, when did you notice them in the backpack? And he said he recalls stuff in his dreams and random flashbacks, and it's kind of a PTSD kind of thing, he said. And then he says that he has nothing, like, in the last few days that he can even think of. He's at a loss. He's in trouble for something that he doesn't even remember doing, he says. And Job says, you recall a lot in great detail. And then he says, but zero filled in the holes that Tanner couldn't. But because of the digital evidence, the timelines, this is Job talking, we're able to fill in every single one of those holes, every one of them but except Y. And I know we touched a little bit about this. And he goes, I don't have any memory of any of that. And they talked about if he R'd her, right? And he says, know anything about that. I'm 98% sure he did not do that. I have not seen anything in my dreams about that. And then Job keeps telling him, I believe you, but I'm going to revert back to talking to you guys and go throughout your life now that you're going to give what is given to you. I have a lot of patience, but when it's crossed the line, it's crossed the line. Like Cassie's mom putting my son's life in danger, he says. If the doctor says she was SA'd, I will go with that. But you're saying you're 98% sure that's not happened. Obviously, we will get all the details, but and then he says he had a nightmare about it for about 2 nights. And then they start talking about you tried to break her neck first. That was 0, he said. And it is your body. They got him another cigarette at this point. He's laughing at something about Mike Tyson while speaking and joking about a cousin. And then they ask him about marks and scratches and things on her, if she has them on her. And he's like, well, that would depend. I did not physically see them, but the pattern on her body. But he said, maybe the transporting her from the truck to the river, I did drag her across the road and in the bamboo, and so she was there at first. And Job asked him, then he goes, yes, it was the same day. See, this doesn't make sense. How could he go back and get her if there are all people looking? So I don't believe that either. And then he says something about, why did you put her in the bamboo? And he goes, well, I wanted someone to find the poor little thing. And he says, that is when you put Athena in the truck, in the creek. And he says, well, when we went to the bamboo, she wasn't there. And Job says, I was perplexed. I talked to 0. So many of the scratches you think are from dragging. And he says, well, the truck floor has a rugged texture. And then he says, you're sure that you didn't do anything to her, like trying to smother her? And he wants to keep from saying Athena's name, but Job says we should say Athena's name, show her respect. And he says, that's a child. And then they ask him, why did you take her clothes? And is that humiliation from 0? And he says his theory is that he has not talked to 0 in a couple of days. Well, the first thing the people you talked to were the FBI. And he goes, well, I was in the back seat for that. Okay. And then he said, when I realized that 0 took over, he said, we share the same mind, but he has access to my memories. My dad had an old Astro van, and he thinks that's where that came from when he told them about an Astro van. Let's see. He says, they said, do you remember where any of the articles of clothing went? And he said he cannot think of anything else. And they said, was she completely nude when she was thrown in the creek? And then he says, I believe so. And then they said, do you remember any other injuries? And he says, no. And then he said, when did you take her clothes off? After or before? He said he did not remember any defecation on the clothes. Part of what he cleaned up was throw up, was his, and poop was hers. Just looking at it only makes sense. And then it says his grandmother sent him something about Athena being missing. And you didn't talk about it to anyone, they said. He said, no. What do you do when you find the clothing? He said he was in denial. He would never have it in his heart to do that. Just like pretending it did not happen and living his life. It's human nature, right? Oh, did something wrong, but you must move past it. Well, that's the thing. He didn't even do this. 0 did. And he says, it would terrify Cassie if he told her this. He didn't pull the trigger. Zero pulled the trigger. He tried to disarm the gun. He tried to stop all this from happening. He said he was not worried about losing his freedom, that it would be talking to the parent. Oh, that he was that it, he wasn't didn't take her because he was worried about losing his freedom. He was worried about talking to the parent, and that was stupid. And he could find another job, so he wasn't worried about losing his job. But Zero said to do this, and he said he sat her on the back of the truck. He tried to calm her down, and Zero took over. She wasn't calming down. He told her, get in the back of the van, and we're going to take you to the hospital. So you went on that private road she was killed on, and then you go on the main road to the bamboo, and essentially her body was left then. After you go to Love's and you ask for cleaning material, and we corroborated that, and they give you sanitizer and brown paper towels. And then about how long of a drawn-out thing do you recall? Was the phone completely turned off? He says he guesses he did. But when it came back on, it had really, really low battery. When did he get her out of the bamboo? And wasn't there a bunch of people searching and helicopters? And no, there are cameras in those FedEx trucks, and they operate if you are speeding or taking a turn. But let's see. But you made a comment. But he tells him how they operate, and he says he didn't know. Oh, they say, no, they operate like that. He's like, I didn't know that. And then they ask him about that tattoo that has Zero's name, and he says that it was a Christian rock band, and when they were trying to think of a name for this other personality, they said, hey, Zero, technically it was in 1999, and then he goes on about this band, and he just spurts out all this information about this band as if they were like his great friends. It was in 1999, there was this band, and then from 2002 to 2004, the guy fell asleep at the wheel, and his girlfriend died, and then Job says, I'll have to look this up. And then he says, yeah, and they had like definitely some metal sound, and then after that, they went to an emo direction, and then it was screaming and singing, and then they mixed the metalcore and the mental health problems, and then he just goes on and on about this this band, okay? And then he says, sorry, I went on a tangent about that. And he said, and he starts telling about his all-time favorite bands, and one of them was Linkin Park, and that's who he named his son after, and two others never heard of. And then he says, when me and Zero, we're talking the other day to Athena, we were all arguing, and Tanner said, put her back. And normally Zero is a cool guy. Everything I wanted to be that day, he was a little more in panic mode. You asked her name? You said hospital? And she asked for her dad several times? And then he said, with me and Zero, we're getting into it. She was looking like help, like she was terrified? Yeah. There were some things that she was scared, and she asked you to stop, not to do it. He goes, I don't think she even knew what was going on. And then he says everyone at the jail looks at him like like he's a monster. He can't even ask for water or something else. Somebody said, but understandably so. But he's not a monster. And then they get up and they go out and they take him out. And then they're back on the stand with Job. They take a lunch break. And then they have Job on the stand to go over the video we just watched and how they came up with the name Zero and how he found Athena's pants in his backpack. And I'm supposed to be on another live by now. I can't believe how long. See how much time I spent on this? On the backpack. And then how he would give them anything they wanted if he just got that 1 month, and he goes back on that one-track mind thing. And then they're talking about when they find Athena. Let's see. Oh, he talks about preservation of evidence. Oh, they're talking about the videos in the truck now. And that guy Job, had to fly up. I'm just going to see if you guys are still here. Had to fly up to North Carolina. They sent a truck for him. I'm trying, not a truck. Oh my gosh, a jet for him. Not a truck. Hi, Terry. How are you? Hi, Colleen Ann. Hi, you didn't see what? What happened? The guy died. You know he's lying out of the side of his neck. Yeah, hi, Zigzag. Sorry, guys. Let me see what's going on. It's longer than I thought. I can tolerate a ton of personality types and be civil, but a narcissist just makes me clench my fists. Okay, what happened? Colleen, this is about the trial about the FedEx guy who kidnapped the 7-year-old girl. Yes, Margaret, he is sure when her hi, Jen girl. Oh my gosh, Mr. Wu. I have to play a song for Mr. Wu. I didn't know that there were 2 reports in the past when he was younger. Yeah, I didn't know if they went through with it on charges. Okay. You know what I did read, that he does have some SA allegations towards him in the past with women. And yeah, and they said something early on in the trial that he was with he had another girl in that truck or something. I don't think they've even touched on that yet. Yes, he is so manipulative. He's a liar. And he can't even say Athena's name and what he did to that poor little angel. And it's all about him. Okay, so Dookie and everybody who's Jason. Hi, Jason. Yeah, this is a terrible case. Oh, hi, Jet Said. How are you? Okay, hi, everybody. I'm so glad you're all here. Thank you for chatting in there. All right, so let me finish this. I'm going to be late for my next live, but we got to get through this, and I want to show you this picture of this shed, too, that he was living in. It was just horrendous. Okay, I'll try to speed it up a little bit. Okay, so they're on the stand, they're asking him. So they said that, okay, so tell us about this preservation of evidence. Okay, so they got the truck that Athena was murdered in, and then you got the truck that he was found in. So those are in evidence. Then you have that SD card from that FedEx truck. So yes, so they go in this big long song and dance about how this happened. Okay. This SD card, it can only be played with a certain bit of software, and it's by the company that runs these cameras. So he had to go up to North Carolina. Somebody got him some jet, took him up there. He met with the guy. Guy was so nice, so wonderful, so great. And Velociter reminds me of Rasta Cheer chicken, like that Scooter's daughter says. And then that was January 23rd. By the time they finally got to see the video from the truck, okay? And they go on and on and on about that whole software thing. And then, let's see, he's cross-examined. And of course, got that female defense attorney, and she says, why wasn't he read his rights when he was arrested and he was detained the first time? And that's when the brother got him. And it was 16 minutes before you read him his rights. And Job says, well, there's extenuating exigent circumstances because it was a missing child and we don't have to do that. We're doing that. And I got it after 16 minutes and I didn't ask him any questions. In fact, I stopped him from telling me anything before 60 minutes except, where is she? And she argues back and forth. And then he says, she's like, how many times did he ask you in there? What happens if I get an attorney? What happens when I get an attorney? And he's like, yes. And they're like, okay. And they're like, and then there's another interview from December 7th, and you Mirandized him, but when he told you about his attorney, did you try to find out who his attorney was? Did you try to contact him? And he's like, no. And then she's like, did you reach out later? And he's like, no. Did you find out who he is? And he's like, yes. And then she says, were you aware that right after he reached out to you, he cut himself in his jail cell? He said, I asked him what was on his arm. And then she says, did you know he tried to take his life in May of 2023? And he's like, yes. And then she says, he spoke to you in these interviews multiple times that he had suicidal ideations. Yes. Before his arrest. Yes. And currently. Yes. Didn't he ask you to shoot him in the head? He says, yes. She says, didn't he ask you several times to shoot him in the head? He says, I only recall once. And then didn't he talk to you about his mental health issues? You were aware if he was hospitalized? He said, I wasn't aware he was hospitalized. He said it was outpatient. And then she goes, you knew he needed medications? And he's like, yes. And he's like, you learned he has Asperger's? And he's like, no, I didn't learn that. He told me that. I don't know if it's true. And then she's like, you learned about his hospitalizations and his medication? He's like, no, he told me about his medication. And then she just goes on and on. Well, you have the reports, blah, 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 you know. And then she's like, did you know Prozac is used to treat major depressive disorder? And he's like, no, I'm not aware of that. And she's like, do you know Strattera is made to treat ADHD? And he's like, no, I'm not aware of that. And then she says, you said Tanner did not show remorse in these interrogations. And he's like, yep. And she's like, but he expressed emotions about what happened. And he's like, yes, ma'am. And she's like, he expressed something, and you said it's all right. And he said, it's not all right. It's not all right to hurt a child. And he goes, yes. And she said, when you asked if he was remorseful, he said, I'm a father. I took something away from someone. And he goes, yes, ma'am. And she goes, when you asked about the community, he said, no one deserves this. And he's like, yes, ma'am. And then he said, the fact that Athena is dead broke his heart. Yes, ma'am, he says. And she says, Ranger Espinoza, you recognize that Tanner was being remorseful as well. And he says, that is part of the interview tactic. It's for rapport. It's for a strategy. She says, so you lied to him? And he says, it's a strategy. And she said, but what did you say? But you did say it. And he goes, yes, ma'am. And then she said, during these investigations, Tanner was being cooperative? Yes, ma'am. You said you would tell everyone how cooperative he was. Did you? No, he says. She says, did you tell everyone he was willing to help? He goes, no, ma'am, I did not. And then she says, at one point, you told Tanner it was about doing the right thing. To you, it would go, that would be confessing to a murder. He says he did confess to murder. And then it would be to recover the body. And she said, Tanner helped you recover the body. He says, yes. And then she said, but Zero told you the truth about what happened. And he goes, no, Tanner did. And she goes, so Tanner was truthful and Zero was being truthful. Oh, this is what he said. And Zero is Tanner. Because she wanted to put them as two different people, okay? And he said, that doesn't mean Tanner is being truthful. Even though you say Tanner was not being truthful, she said, but he was not the only one not being truthful. And he says, what are you talking about? What you talking about, Willis? And then she says, I'm talking about saying that you would allow him to call Cassie, and you lied. You said okay, and you never let him call. And he said, I meant at the jail. And she said, you told him he would see his son. And he goes, I do not recall that. And then she says, well, the jury will see the video and they'll remember what you said. And then she said, when Tanner said he wanted to cut the deal, the thing was, if you received the deal, he would tell the truth. But that is, let me see. And then he says, but that is not the truth. And she goes, oh, well, whatever. The jury's going to see the video. And then Job said he only entered a plea and would give up all. She said he said he would enter a plea and give up all of his defenses. And he would give you any info you wanted. And he would go to prison forever. All of this, so he could just say goodbye to his family, she said. And she said, he asked you to relay all of this to the judge and the prosecutors. And you said you would do that, did you? He said, well, I believed I did. He said, I just, that he wanted to cut a deal. And she said, you didn't give them all the details? And he said, no. And she said, when did you do that? And he said, that week. And he said, it's not possible to be on that monitor, but you're not the prosecutor, she said. And he goes, right. And he says, which judge? She said, which judge did you talk to? And he said, Brock Smith. And that's from the DA's office. Then he went to, let's see what she said to him. Oh, she tells him that he didn't write in his police report this. And he's like, I told him to reference the video. How many pages is your police report? He says 75 pages. She says, you're telling the jury that he is willing to make a deal and you didn't want to put it in written form in your police report. And he goes, I said to reference the video. And then she moves on. And then he says that Tanner, she says Tanner's interrogation and all the videos shown to the jury, Tanner was easily distracted. He says that's a matter of opinion. She says, you said he did and you redirected him. And then he said, he started talking about the deal. Then I redirected him back to talking about the why. And she said, Tanner was polite to all officers, right? To the best of my recollection, he said. And she's like, he says, yes, sir, no, sir, yes. And he did not curse at any of the officers, no, ma'am. And then let's see, he did not raise his voice except when talking about something that interests him. No fighting and no resistance. Nope, says Job. He was respectful to your authority. Yes, ma'am. Ranger Espinoza, you have a Bible verse on your handcuffs, Romans 13:4. And then he's like, yes, ma'am. And then she's like, so, for he is God's servant for your good, but if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. And I don't know why she even brought that up. I really don't. And then they do redirect. And so the DA says, well, Tanner requested the interview with you, right? Why do I keep forgetting his name is Job? I want to say Hernandez, Espinoza. Okay. He is the one in all the things that the defense attorney just questioned you on. You were in the bamboo because of what he told you. Yes. You don't know anything about the evidence, that anything that he tells you is about himself is true. Correct. He told you back, you don't know that anything he told you back in that interview room is true. And he told you he didn't take off her clothes. Was that true? No. He told you her body was in the bamboo forest. Was that true? No. When you told him you had faith in him, that he was telling the truth, did you believe that? No. He says, I knew he was lying. Why is it you keep him talking like that? He says, I want to keep the rapport up. You asked him if he was remorseful. He did not say he was remorseful. He said he was a father. He never said, I kidnapped her, I killed her, I'm sorry. When we say Tanner was truthful about what happened, was he truthful about the bamboo? No. Uh-oh, sorry, hold on a minute. Hold on. My Zoom ended there. I got to put myself back up. Hold on. Hold on, please. There we go. Okay, so he said, now as her clothes were taken off, was he truthful? No. How would you believe what he says when the majority of what he says are lies? And Espinoza says, I could not believe what he said. He's being cooperative, except he's lying. Yes, Espinoza says. When you sat down with him for the 4th interview, he wanted you to pay a price for the truth, isn't it? Yes. Throughout all of this, the only thing he told you that was truthful was that she was deceased? Yes. The rest of the stuff you said you had to learn on your own? Yes. Then there's a recross. Oh my gosh, I thought this guy was never going to get off the stand. When Tanner told you that he has taken meds and he was at Knollwood, did you obtain that and verify that information? Yes, ma'am. Then if you happen to know that, you know it wasn't a lie. He said, I don't know that. I know that the medical records were obtained, and the DA's office would obtain the records. They would be privy to that. He says, I don't have them. Then she says, the purpose of the deal was to enter a plea. And he says, well, that is not how it's done. And then she said, well, you saw in that video that he would take a plea to go away for life. So it is not for telling the truth. He had a whole list of things. And then they redirect. They said, when you detained Tanner on Faith and Hope roads, it was your brother, right? Yes. When you got to the scene, the purpose of the questions, it fell under the public safety exception. Miranda doesn't apply, right? At that point, when he was under arrest or just detained. Okay, so then finally they dismiss that witness and they get special agent from the FBI, Travis Page. He said he arrived on the 2nd day of the disappearance, December 1st. Was the child still missing? Yes. Did you know if the child was alive or not? No. Did that qualify for exigent circumstances? Yes. Can you define geofencing? And he said, well, in the simplest of terms, it's IDing previously unidentifiable individuals who were in that area. There is a known event. In this case, it's a missing child. And you want to ID all the devices that are in that spot. Did you do that? We did. When you go to the missing child, who are the first people you look at? He says the family. Not just that they're the suspects, but you want to get you want to corroborate their statements. Then there's a cross, geofencing, and who he made the request to. He said he made the request to T-Mobile, and then they excused him. Okay, then Bruce Sherman got on there, and he's a lieutenant with the Texas Department of the Inspector General, but back in 2022, he was a Texas Ranger with the Department of Public Safety, and they go through his employment and all that stuff. And then when he got there on December 2nd, he went straight to the command post. He arrived. He was given a task, not initially, but after a short period of time. And something told him things were rapidly evolving and he was trying to preserve any online leads which had led that they had a suspect who, this is the guy I was talking about in the car, okay? This is that online presence where they go in and they get everything locked down, okay? So they knew it was a FedEx driver, and they're trying to preserve any of the online leads. And so he goes on there, and there's a portal that law enforcement can go into, and they say, hey, we got to lock this down. But like, he won't notice anything if he was on social media, but it's not going to let him delete anything. It's not going to let him do anything to his social media. So he was talking a bunch about that, about the portal. And then he said that he was doing some surveillance of Tanner's home, but he was in another driveway. He wasn't actually there, and they didn't need a search warrant because it was exigent circumstances because of the missing child. And they were doing this because there was a missing child. They talked about the search of the home. They talked about what happens if you see potential evidence when you're doing that. She says, you have to get another search warrant. He goes, no, we have to get a search warrant if there's any potential evidence. And then they crossed them, and she showed a photo of the house, and that is the front of the house, and it's the home of the mother and the grandfather. And then they're showing that he's surveilling the house, and that he parked in a nearby driveway, and that he ID'd several cell phones in the house that were all of theirs, and he got consent to extract this stuff from their phones. And then she said, but you went in, you pointed weapons at them, there was screaming, and they're like, no, they're objecting, he wasn't there. And she's like, he goes, you said if they were escorted out, I told you that. And the elderly grandmother was in a wheelchair, she said. He says he didn't know that. He didn't know what transpired. He wasn't at the home. And then with the exception of the warrant, you're there looking for a person, and you didn't see evidence of the crime. And then but she says, but if the officer finds something they believe, they have to get a search warrant. If he goes, if something's in plain view, no, he goes, they have to get a search warrant. There's not one there yet. In the case of a missing person, they're just hoping that she's found alive. So if a person is presumed to be deceased, she says, then you definitely, there's no exigency, right? And he's like, no, I don't think that's the case. That's a case-by-case basis. And then when you had Tanner's mother, grandmother, and brother, what did she say? You know what? She goes, nothing further. And then she can't remember his name, so he goes, Bruce. And she goes, oh, that's my dog's name. And he goes, I'm flattered. And it was really bad and flippant. And then the witness got excused. The next one was an FBI special agent. And he talks about his experience as the team leader for hazardous environments. And they asked him, how did the FBI get involved with Athena Strand's case? And he said, we were invited to, by, in this case, the sheriff's office. We were asked to assist. And there's a method for doing that. And then he talks about the FBI in Dallas. And he said that at the residence of Tanner's mother and grandmother, there was potential evidence. It was very messy. The shed was so messy that he said they would have to work in two teams. And he said one for the main house and one for that shed in the back. And it was just, there was garbage all over the place. And they put the pictures into evidence, and they show how he found the jeans in the back, and he found a sock in the back that was Athena's. And then he found another sock in the jeans. And, but they didn't find her shirt, and the stuff was just thrown like in the back in the trash. So they showed it all. And then they had the bags, how they have the bags in the trunk, but thank goodness they didn't make him open it. Yuck. I can't stand that. That part, it makes me so nuts, especially when they have blood and body fluids all over everything. It drives me insane. They get it all over the witness stand. Ugh. Okay. Let's see. They started to collect things, he said, and he starts talking about how they're collecting the evidence, right? And then he says, like, when they take an entry photo, they like to get the number, the front door, and those are your points of entry into that property. And then you get the scale, and he's like telling how you take the two views of the thing, you put it on this essentially butcher paper, and they were looking for her clothes. So they got, mostly the underwear, the jeans, the socks. They found his shirt and the hoodie, and those were what they had. And that was like an abrupt end of the day. Like, that we just didn't even say, like, okay, come back tomorrow. But let me show you a picture here. Hold on a second. This is Taylor Horner's. This is the shed that he lived in with his girlfriend. And this is like where he's saying that he's going to have Christmas with the Trains, unless he means at the mother-in-law's house, because I don't know how he has Christmas with the Trains here. It's just impossible. I mean, and he said, remember, he cleaned the crap out of this. There's just garbage. Look at this. They have like a vacuum and a guitar and a chair. Like, they didn't do this. This is not from them. This is how they arrived, okay? This is how they arrived on the property. And it's just garbage, just thrown about. Horrible, horrendous. And when he was outside, smoking cigarettes. And in the back where they found her clothes, it was even it was just, it was horrible. It was just like that and worse. So it wasn't like he was keeping them for a trophy. You know what I'm saying? It was bizarre. Like, why? As someone said, I guess he didn't know. This was the December 7th. It's weird because he looks heavy there, but he doesn't, like a week earlier when he didn't look that heavy. Let's see. This is the night that he was arrested here, when he was smoking outside with them. And let me see. Hang on a sec. I'm going to be getting all the discovery anyway for this case, so we'll go through the photos, but hold on a minute. Okay. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, here, I got another picture of the inside. Look at this. The walls are all, I don't even know what he has all written on here. Look at this. See, people think the baby was in here. The baby wasn't in here. But there was like, they said there was like no floor to even walk on. I love, what does that say? Let me see if I can read any of this. I love my family. Wait a minute. Tanner. And K or something. It says, this house, or there's something, and then it says gorilla, G-O-R, gorilla. Looks up there, it looks like we, W-H, looks like black mold on the top of there. Okay, let's see. And this was the sock that was Athena's. Uh-oh, where'd you go? And then they found the other sock and the jeans. I mean, one of the things he said, if I was just a cold-blooded killer, I'd have been killing people for years. I have a conscience. I'm just a person. And this was him in court today when they were showing the pictures. He was looking intently when they were showing the pictures. That's him right there. And this is a memorial that they made for Athena at the water's edge. And this was when he was waiting out, when they were waiting outside the, to go back in for the next interview. Okay, well, let me see. Let me see where you guys are. Okay, where the heck are you guys? Where are you? I can't find you. Hold on a minute. You're over here. Okay, so Colleen, spoiled and picked on both. In other countries, this guy who killed Athena would have been put to death, says Terry. They would have my Cabbage Patch Kids on that. They would hang my Cabbage Patch Kids on their weight benches. I was spoiled and protected, but also tormented. Who did that? Your brothers? You had brothers like that? That's like brothers do that, right? It's crazy. Brothers sometimes. It's not a shed. It's its own dump site, Carolyn. He entertains a lot of big bugs and some mice and rats. They probably take his arse to work. Yeah, probably. But he's so scared of the spiders, and he said, did you hear when he said he cleaned the crap out of it, or the shite out of it? What are all those X's? Why does Jen have a whole bunch of X's? No sound? Is that true? You guys didn't have any sound? Wait a second. I can't believe that. Oh, did something wrong, but you must be distracted. I have sound. Tanner's mother and grandmother listen to you. So my son and live with her family. Why did Jen say no sound? Was there you guys had sound the whole time, right? Did you guys have sound the whole time? When? When couldn't you hear for 4 minutes? Did everybody else not have sound for 4 minutes? You lost sound when? POS, right? Talks about pulled the trigger with Job. They take a look. Apparently, is 75. He's lying. I'm going to the house and clean the crap out of it. I'm going through this whole thing. When was there no sound? The evidence, right? With them. Just now when I was showing the thing? And I hear sound. When was there no sound? I had some sound issues, but okay, let's see. Okay, I'm listening. The things he said, if he entertained, and then they found the other side. Oh yeah, here I got. I think it's especially when they have blood like 20 minutes body. Ago, Dookie. You told. What did you do that? Of God, who loved understandably software to be on that monitor. Yeah, they started getting better, and then he says that it was a he had anything. Maybe you guys just because she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, essentially. Oh, okay. And then he says, "Can I have another cigarette?" All right. Well, guess what? Guess what? Did Mr. Wu get here? Hi, Amy. We're going to go on to the next video. You know which the next video is? Tomorrow is day 4 of this. I've got to make an ice cream cake. Listen to this one. I've got to make an ice cream cake tomorrow while I'm transcribing this trial. Okay? So just think that I'm here transcribing this and making an ice cream cake while you're watching it. Carolyn. Oh, and guess what else I'm going to make? Guess what else? Guess what else? Right, do you remember I told you I can never find that sorbet again? It was a farmer's something, and I didn't want to spend the money on it the one time. And then I said, you know what? It's worth it. It's plain fruit, has no sugar in it. It was like The greatest thing. I went back to look for it. I've been looking for it for 3 years. I can't find it anywhere. So, right? So all of a sudden I think to myself, crap. You know, I had a Yo Nanas. Do you remember the Yo Nanas machine? I have it somewhere. They sent it to me for my blog. If you put frozen bananas, I'm thinking frozen bananas and any other frozen fruit, and you put it through this thing, and I told you that Rosemarie's son made it, and I said, oh my gosh, I haven't used a Yo Nanas machine in ages, right? And it was just that, and it was delicious, okay? So then, I don't even know where my Yo Nanas machine is, right? Because I haven't used it in ages. I probably gave it to someone. I don't know what I did with it. And it's like my family doesn't want to eat healthy. No, that's not true. So anyway, I said, why can't I get that sorbet? Because I want that sorbet. So guess what? So I looked up a recipe last night, and do you know how you make it? This sorbet? You just put frozen fruit in your Vitamix or some kind of a blender like that really emulsifies, with a little bit of almond milk, or you could use oat milk, or you could even use regular milk, or you could use fruit juice, and that's it. So I bought a bunch of frozen fruit, and then I'm going to start freezing my own fruit here of all my fruit, and I'm going to start making my own sorbet. Doesn't have added sugar, and if you wanted to, you could put monk fruit sugar in it. Is something I'm not going to. You could put honey if you want, but I'm just going to make it because that's how, if you put bananas in, it gets sweet enough, and that's how the Yo Nanas machine works. But I don't need a Yo Nanas machine because I have a Vitamix. So yeah, so when John was making it with the Yo Nanas machine, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're using the Yo Nanas machine. That's so good. And it was really good. But anyway, I'm going to make that. So I'll make a video and I make that. And then I've got to make an ice cream cake. And then I'm going to be transcribing the trial. But now I'm going to do another video, which is about the lady that went overboard. I was talking to Gia after my live today. Gia and Michael called me. And then I was telling them all about this woman that went overboard. And then we were talking about Athena Strand. And we're talking about a bunch of things. So, yeah. Yeah, about time. She hardly ever comes anymore. Do you know what, Terry? There used to be a time when she was my biggest fan, okay? She fangirled me. She sent me a package. I've never sent a package to any YouTuber ever. She was all enamored with me. The first time she met me, she's like, can I hug you? Now she's like, is she on? Yeah, I'll catch it later. I'll go in for the last 5 minutes and just make an appearance. I'm so over her. So over her. That's how it is, Terry. And don't worry, Terry. She's your bestie now. Just wait. Just wait. She'll get her fill. And then she'll be like, oh, I got to go in and say hi to Terry. I'll do it for the last 5 minutes. See? See? She was fangirling me. And then now, you see what it is? Now she just feels like she got, like that's it. Yeah. Can you imagine? She's like, I get to, she was my roommate for, we roomed together in 2024. In 2025, we had our own rooms. In 2023, I didn't room with her, right? And in 2022, wait a minute. No, wait a minute. No. So we only roomed together 1 year. But that was enough, right? She's your bestie now, but tomorrow you could be her chopped liver. Yeah, probably. That's how she is, right? Yep. You've been listening all night. Sure, she used to be like, constantly. I'm going to have to go back and find that video where she put all over the box, this is the first YouTuber I've ever sent a present to, and all that stuff. Now, oh, Mr. Wu, I've got your song. Thank you for the Cash App here. Let me play Mr. Wu's song. I've been asking for you before we go to our next video. Yeah, I used to be something. Then Scooter's just like, psh. I could have, psh. It's ridiculous. So stupid. Let me see. I don't know. Is this the one I sent? Let's see.
Hey. Hey, Rambler, thank you for the love on mommy ramblings. You light us up, yeah, you keep us shining. From your heart to ours, we feel that spark, bringing so much light when it's feeling dark. Oh, hash came through, yeah, we heard that cha-ching train. Rambler showing love makes our whole heart sing. Oh, thank you, Rambler, we see you. Mommy ramblings couldn't do it without you.
Thank you. Thank you for the Cash App, Mr. Wu. And I'm going to have to make a song about Scooter's relationship with me, right? How she was all enamored, fangirling, and all that stuff. And then now she's just like chopped liver. See, I'm going to have to make a song about it. Yep. I'm going to have to. Let's see. I'm going to make a song about Scooter's thing. Yes, Carolyn, like Jen said, thank you very much for covering this. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, I didn't know that you sent that last night until I told you. Cash App is, it's like, the way I get notifications are so crazy. Is that me singing? No, Dookie, you don't want to hear me singing. Okay? It's all good. You're behind in the chat, girlfriend. Who is behind in the chat, girlfriend? Which one? Which girlfriend? Oh, you're welcome, Terry. So we're going to go wife overboard now, okay? So I want you, there's 43 people here right now. I really hope 43 people hightail it over because it's going to redirect you, okay? I'm not going to say goodbye to you because we're not leaving. We're going to the next one, so I'll see you over there.